Committee on Closing the Gaps. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank not only the board members but the staff for making the effort to be here. Just a week or two from Christmas, I know that there's a lot of different directions that people tend to go this time of year, but I do want to thank people for making the effort to be here. I would be remiss if I didn't make one comment that's totally unrelated to what we're here today for, and I've already had to give McGregor a little bit of problem about this. The University of Houston actually has another new mission, and that mission is to train new coaches for other collegial teams in the state of Texas. And I would like to say that I think we're doing a pretty good job. Art Briles has gone on to Baylor, and of course we all know what kind of job he's done there. And I want to congratulate my Aggie friends that are here in the audience as well as up here on the stage. You've succeeded in getting another good coach, Kevin Sumlin. And UT Sippers or UT people out there, watch very carefully who we're fixing to hire, because he very well could be y'all's next coach if Mac doesn't do a little bit better job in the next year or two. But I'm not going to inject myself into that particular problem. So, but I couldn't help myself, McGregor. You understand that. But anyway,
you're closing the gaps initiative.
That's we're trying to close the gaps between Texas schools and those schools that are going into SEC. We want to close that gap so you guys won't be so far behind and so far down on the totem pole. So we decided, as a goodwill gesture, we would go ahead and release our coach under his contract and let him go into A&M Aggie land so we could close the gaps. Well, I knew y'all would, and it was a hard thing to do, but we knew it was a worthy cause. Okay, having said that, we'll now turn to more serious and more pertinent stuff. We'll hereby call the meeting to order. Agenda item number 1 is welcome. The chairman's committee's welcome and committee chair overview, which I think I just concluded. That's, I think, is probably the most pertinent activity that's gone on since our last meeting, even though it didn't relate completely to closing the gaps. The coordinating board hosted the state P16 council meeting on Wednesday, October the 12th, 2011 in Austin. This was the 4th state P16 council meeting of the 2011, chaired by Commissioner Raymond Paredes. New council members, Dr. Beverly Mitchell Brooks, president of the Greater Dallas and North Central Texas Urban League, was introduced. Presentations included the status of Texas workforce and data on the Texas job market, making Texas higher education affordable and accessible for non-traditional students, improving the school readiness of children and impacting families through partnerships with community-based organizations, and how a community has embraced Generation Texas and closing the gaps. This next state P16 council meeting is scheduled for January 11th, 2012 at 2 p.m. in this boardroom. In 2012, the council will focus on developing strategies that align education at every level with workforce needs. We'll move on to item agenda 2, consideration and adopting the minutes from the September 20th, 2011 Committee on Closing the Gaps meeting. The board has been presented with those minutes prior to the meeting. Is there any questions or concerns about how they're printed? If not, the chair would entertain a motion that we adopt the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Before Dr. Conley starts his presentation for the upcoming agenda item, I would like to recognize a group here at the coordinating board today. The Regional College Readiness Special Advisors. I would like to ask them if they would please stand. I think it's a group of maybe 10 or 11 people. I want everybody to take an opportunity to look at this particular group. They have done a tremendous job over the last year or two, maybe even a little longer than that, in putting together the college readiness and career standards. I would like to ask them if they wouldn't mind introducing themselves and tell us what institution that you are from, starting on this side, if you don't mind. I want to thank you on behalf of this board and the citizens of the state of Texas on the wonderful job that y'all have done over the last several years. This group started out with, I think, 120 members, and Judy, correct me if I say something in error, and these are the individuals that have really taken a major lead in the work of this committee. They have just, I think, set a shining example not only for the state of Texas, but put together a plan that I think will be emulated by a lot of other states across this country. The work that they've done, I think, could be described as pioneering work. They've gone into an area that's hasn't been plowed. That ground's, I'd say, new ground that y'all are plowing, and we've got a tremendous amount of a number of individuals with a whole group here that have been innovative and creative and have really put Texas, I believe, at the top, if not the top, near the top, when we compare what they've done in this particular area with what the rest of the country has done. Our hats are off to you all for the work, the time, effort, and energy, and more than that, in my mind, the creativity and the in terms of what you've done. On behalf of this board and this agency, we and the citizens of this great state, we want to personally thank you guys for the hard work, the dedication, and your focus on students. And that's what it's all about. And I have been abreast of what y'all have been doing and have been doing, and I don't think I've ever seen a group of people that have risen to the challenge that you individuals have done. I've been around a long time. Doesn't mean I have all the answers, but I've seen a lot of challenges in higher education. Y'all's work has been stellar. We're proud of y'all, and thank you from the bottoms of our hearts for the hard work that you've done and will continue to do. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add also, in addition to the very nice thoughts that you said about these individuals, I just want to keep in mind that this is not their only job. They have been designated by their institutions. They all have titles and full responsibilities, but they've taken on this work because of their belief in it. And we as a small staff could not cover the state without their help in the work that they do when they're setting up meetings, organizing events, trying to help us carry this message forward. So it's what makes their job and the recognition deserving, because this is way and beyond what they just do normally every day. So when you call them and say, we need help, we need a meeting in your area, we need to focus on this, and they come to the table and they roll it out, it does mean a lot to this agency and to the students of Texas.
You know, y'all have truly distinguished yourself in higher education in this state, and again, once again, I want to congratulate you on a job well done. It's almost overwhelming, and I think that you will enjoy and can sit back at some point in the near future and see the impact that you've made on the lives of a lot of young students and a lot of young people in this state. And again, thank you. These education leaders are from various colleges and universities around the state. They've worked together along with our CB staff and with stakeholders in their regions to coordinate and support initiatives that will improve the college and career readiness of the state's students. I wanted to bring your attention to this group because the special advisors meeting here today are a select group of the original 120 special advisors who assisted the coordinating board in EPIC in the refinement and implementation of the college and career readiness standards. Indeed, they continue to work with us today in this endeavor. The work about which Dr. Conley will be speaking today could not have been done without their contributions of the college readiness and special advisors. Thank you so much for your service. At this point, I guess we will move on to item 3, which is the presentation of the final results of the 4-year contract between the Coordinating Board and the Educational Policy Improvement Center concerning the development and implementation of the college and career readiness standards. Some of you new board members that are here, this agency contracted with Dr. Conley and his group, the Educational Policy Improvement Center. I believe they're connected with the University of Oregon, if I'm correct, about 4 years ago, and they have all but completed their work, and I believe this is the last obligation that Dr. Conley will have under that contractual agreement that was made 4 years ago. So, Dr. Conley, we're proud that you're here. The work that you've done, and let me say this, in my mind, as well as the minds of a lot of people in this agency, David Conley has written the book and is perhaps the number one individual perhaps in the country today that knows more about the topic in which he's going to discuss than perhaps anyone else that we know of. So this agency should be commended for bringing in the best and the brightest, and I think we're going to see a lot of good things happen as a result of your work. I'm going to turn the program over to you now. Thank you for being here.
I press that. Thank you, Chairman Golden. Last night on the way in from the airport, the driver asked me if this was my first time in Austin. I said, no, it's more like my 20th. But it's always a pleasure to be here, and it's been a great opportunity over the last, really, our relationship started even before the 4 years of this work when Dr. Paredes reached out to me and asked me to come and talk with this board and others in the agency about very early on in the process of thinking about this whole notion of college and career readiness. And I think that really characterizes the whole nature of this work, which is that Texas really has led the nation in thinking about the connection between high school and college and thinking about aligned systems where you're connecting up high school and college in a systematic fashion in ways that make it clearer to high school students what they need to do to be ready for post-secondary education and clearer to colleges what they need to do to enhance student success as the students come to their institution. So that's the framing concept I'd like to offer you for this work. There's a lot of detail in the presentation I'm going to give, but I'm not going to get into that level of detail. You have a handout that does show you everything that we've done here with additional information. I'm going to hit the high points of that. You also have a one-page handout in front of you, I notice, that will summarize this for you. The PowerPoint goes into a little bit more detail. And, of course, the staff is available if you have questions about specific entities. We did want to make sure that you were aware of the scope of this work, and not to bog you down in the details of it, though. I did want to present here the highlights and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. So I'll go relatively quickly through the presentation. Feel free at any time to stop if you have questions. But I want to start by just with the first slide of mentioning the fact that the reason for this work is that Texas really is in a unique situation, I think, in the nation. Other states are coming to this same situation quickly, but the changing demographics, the changing economy, the changing needs of the state relative to education. Education is the future of the state. It is the future of the society in this state, that for all people to have access to a sound economic future and to participation in the society, education is the key. And high school education anymore is not enough. It's got to be beyond high school. Students have to be able to continue to learn beyond high school. Not everyone needs the same level of education or the same degree, but everyone needs to be able to keep learning beyond high school. So the key concept here is that how do you connect the systems up so that students have the tools and the capability, whether it's to go to a community college and get a certificate or go on to a four-year institution and pursue a baccalaureate degree or beyond. How do they have the skills to do that? So that's the basic goal of this entire set of work. So if we take a look then and think about the Texas work in relationship to what's going on around the nation, you can find a lot of activity, certainly, in the country, but there aren't any states that have come at this as comprehensively. Florida has done a lot of work around aligning its data systems and aligning its assessment systems. But where you've gone further is you thought about the actual nature of the courses themselves. How do the high school courses align with the college courses? What are the standards that we should have? What's the content knowledge? What are the cognitive skills? What are the learning strategies that students need to have to be successful in post-secondary education? In other words, your approach has been more comprehensive and more all-encompassing when we think about the things that students need to do to be able to succeed in post-secondary education. You've gone beyond test scores to think about the learning process more generally. I'm going to offer you an overview. It's got a lot of arrows in it and stuff, but it's not really at the heart of it. It's not that complicated. And I'll refer over to this overhead here into this screen. If you think about the college and career readiness standards at the center of this process, that's what really drove all of the other activities. Knowing what it is that students have to be able to do to succeed in post-secondary education is at the heart of it. And keep in mind that yours was the first set in the nation of a comprehensive set of college and career readiness standards adopted by a post-secondary system. There had been some other efforts. Our group, Standards for Success, had done it. Achieve, through the American Diploma Project, had created a set of standards. But no state had really come up with a comprehensive set. To do that, the vertical teams were assembled, and the college and career readiness advisors who are in the room here some of them were involved in that process, and their work is an outgrowth of the vertical teams. A vertical team is a combination of secondary school educators and post-secondary school faculty, and working together to define the standards. Once the vertical teams developed the standards had to be tested out and to see if they really were correct, and to do that, a validity study was undertaken. A validity study is when you analyze whether the standards match up with what actually goes on in entry-level college courses. So that study confirmed that the standards reflected what instructors in your state in a wide range of post-secondary institutions, pretty much every institution in the state, what they believed was important to succeed in their courses. Finally, to be completely thorough, an additional set of studies were done to see if the college and career readiness standards reflected what go on in career technical education courses in post-secondary education. So beyond the general finding that the standards prepare students to succeed in general education, a more specific set of findings were that particularly the cross-cutting standards, in other words, the intellectual core standards of the college and career readiness standards, were found to be applicable in career technical education courses in a whole range of courses that apply more specifically to pursuing a career pathway. So those are the three sets of studies. This is the reference point. The two major outcomes, in addition to the standards themselves, were a set of college readiness assignments, and those assignments are activities that can be done in high school that will help high school students and teachers understand the level of readiness students have for post-secondary education. So it might be a research paper, it might be a complex math problem, and the teachers have then scoring guides to help them see how the student's performance on that task would rank them relative to being ready for college. Now that's important because most teacher grading in high school is done, however, against whatever standard the teacher wants. So having a common set of standards and a reference point in these assignments helps teachers to know and students to know if they're really college ready. Finally, the reference courses are basically post-secondary courses, the design of which gives high school teachers in particular a reference point when they think of what they need to be doing to get students ready for college. So reference courses you can think of as kind of a composite of the best of teaching practices and content in your state that tell high school instructors what it is that they should be doing and where they should be pointing their expectations for students. Those reference courses also can be valuable within the post-secondary system as well as a starting point for discussion about what expectations are held by the system, but primarily they're for use as a reference point for high schools. So that's the overview. The rest of this goes into more detail, so let me do this relatively quickly, and I don't want to give anyone whiplash, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on any of the slides. Feel free to stop me anytime you want, or we'll just move through it and we can then discuss. If you're probably aware of the context of this, which is that all of these activities were mandated by HB1. They're sponsored by the coordinating board, and in most cases in partnership with TEA, which is why you see so many activities that span into secondary school. Kind of unusual for the post-secondary agency to be taking the lead on activities that span into high school, but this really is important. This is the 21st century strategy that we need, is to connect high school and college together by the post-secondary system taking the lead and not waiting and following the secondary system. In your state, you have a very active secondary or your K-12 system with a lot of policy activity. I think in order to keep things in sync, you need an equally active post-secondary system from a policy point of view. I mentioned the college and career readiness standards, so I'll walk through this kind of quickly without giving you a lot of detail on them. They contain content areas, but also cross-disciplinary standards. And I'd call your attention to the cross-disciplinary standards because they're one of the unique elements in your system. The content, you can see, talks about key content, organizing concepts, and performance expectations. But the cross-disciplinary standards get at key skills that cut across all of the disciplinary areas, such as writing skills, analytic skills, researching skills, time management type of skills, and study skills, other areas of that nature. And I'd point out to you that your college and career readiness standards go beyond the National Common Core state standards in a couple of ways. One is, in addition to math and English, you also have science and social studies. And in addition to content standards, you also have the cross-disciplinary standards. Now, I should add, parenthetically, that our center, EPIC, did a study analyzing the alignment between the Common Core standards and 5 sets of what we considered to be high-quality standards that were out there that were at the level of college and career readiness. Those included the standards for California and Massachusetts, for the International Baccalaureate, for Standards for Success, which is our standards that we developed with AAU universities, and finally the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards. And I know Dr. Paredes and Dr. Laredo are familiar with the study and are aware of it, and we'd be glad to share the findings. The short version of this is that you find a high degree of alignment between the Common Core standards and the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards. So for anyone who says that Texas is somehow not participating or taking a different path than the rest of the nation relative to the Common Core standards, the only thing I would say is the only path you're taking that's any different is you're taking a path that's more comprehensive and probably has more detail, more specification, and more clarity of the expectations and challenges for students. So I don't think you're going off in a different direction. I think you're going deeper. I think you're going more comprehensively. And in some senses, for all we know, you might end up being a model for where the Common Core should evolve in the future as well. Hard to say. But nevertheless, I think you do have the basis for thinking about how your standards fit with the rest of the nation as well. I wouldn't think of these standards as being outliers at all. As we mentioned, the vertical teams a couple of times here, and you can see they were in the 4 areas: ELA, math, science, and social studies. And they also worked on the college readiness assignments. Well, I mentioned that once you have standards, you have to make sure that they actually relate to what goes on in college classrooms. Just developing a set of standards, having a group of people get together and have a bunch of meetings and come up with standards is not enough. It's a good start, but you've got to make sure that they really reflect what goes on in those college courses. So we undertook a study in which we collected 930 syllabi from courses that in those 4 content areas that I mentioned earlier, to see if they aligned. And the summary of this, the courses you can see listed down the left-hand side, and you can also then see the findings, and just to give them to you quickly, the short version of it is a very high degree of alignment between the standards and the different courses in math, in English and math, science, and social studies. And you'll notice the cross-disciplinary, just to call your attention to that line right there, the cross-disciplinary standards, you had 100% alignment with your entry-level college courses. So the CTE validity studies, this became important because what we really have to say is when they're college and career readiness standards, is it and or is it or? And so to answer that question, we had to look at the career-oriented courses to see if the standards fit well with them, to confirm that it was college and career readiness. Because our definition of career is not job training, it's career pathway preparation. So career readiness means not training for a job, not workforce readiness, but it means a level of academic preparation that one can enter a career pathway via a certificate, via a credential of some sort, whether that's a 6-month or 1-year credential or a 2-year program that leads to an associate's. And to give you an example of, here are the results of the study, but you can also see the types of courses we looked at when we thought about career pathways. We thought about accounting, about business management, about computer-aided design, technical drafting, introduction to computers, principles of marketing, computer applications, and business English. And once again, if you look just at the one column here, the aligned column, you'll see that the alignments are all, with business English is a little lower, partly because it's a more academic course that's more specific in one content area. However, in the other courses, you'll see the alignments are in the 60 to 70 to 80% range. So highly aligned with the cross-disciplinary skills. And that was important because you don't want to try to align an accounting course with a set of science standards. That's kind of nonsensical if you go into the content. But if you take a look at the cross-disciplinary, those are the ones that, if we're trying to say they're college and career readiness standards, we want to make sure that alignment is there. So next then were the reference course profiles. And in those reference course profiles, what we did was develop composites of an entry-level college courses. And even though the print is very small, though you're not supposed to be able to actually read that, that's an example of the material themselves. And what we did is develop what you might consider to be a very detailed syllabus. In other words, whereas a syllabus might be 3 to 5 pages for a college course, the reference course profiles might be 20, 30, 40 pages of detailed information about what a composite course in key entry-level college courses look like. So, for example, in a composition course, composition is consistent across your system. At the entry level, you can find a composition course at pretty much every post-secondary institution. But what does that mean? Yes, there are differences from place to place. So if you're a local high school and you're trying to figure out what the expectations are for a composition course, you'd have to go to multiple post-secondary institutions to find out and collect their syllabi. This is a way to help high schools in particular be able to go one place, one-stop shopping, pick up a reference course, see what an entry-level college course is like in composition, and then the high school can design its courses to align with that reference course. And we think particularly, for the large school districts that have curriculum development capacities, this will be easy. The smaller districts will need some help, but you do have the intermediate service districts. You can get some help and support as well for those entities. But this will be largely a curriculum design, curriculum alignment tool that can help help high school expectations get aligned with college expectations. We also think that at some point these will be useful for discussions in post-secondary education about what the expectations are that exist for these entry-level courses. The reference course profile then is the final thing I wanted to talk about. And the reference course profile was, I'm sorry, I'm continuing on the reference course profile, though I'm going to do the college readiness assignment next. But just a bit more information on the reference course profile on this slide that talks about how they're developed. So we'll leave that for your attention later. But you can see that there's a quite extensive database of information with over 2,200 pages of reference documents that can be used by high school and college faculty alike to work together on expectations. So going on to the next slide, then college readiness assignments is the last piece I wanted to talk about. And as I noted earlier, these are classroom-embedded tasks. These are things that are taught in a high school class. And they are directly related to the college and career readiness standards. And they're designed to be cognitively challenging enough to where the students are starting to think at levels consistent with what they'll be asked to do in high school and college. And this is one of the really tremendous gaps between high school and college, is not just the content knowledge itself. It's the expectations for student thinking. And the biggest difference is that in high school, most of the learning is largely procedural. You follow directions. College instruction has an element of procedural teaching to it, but most good college teaching requires students to go beyond procedures to concepts, to thinking about what they're learning and applying it. So the college readiness assignments help students to do that. A bit more information then about the college readiness assignments, that they were designed with the vertical teams. They've been field tested already by 40 instructors and in 2 and 4 institutions at Texas high schools as well, and that they are being revised now, as I understand it. And you'll have 62 final, in the end you'll have 62 assignments and over 1,500 pages of scoring guides and supporting materials. So very extensive resource base as well. All right, so just to summarize, the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards over the past 4 years, this entire initiative has engaged the talents of a wide spectrum of the educators in your state, in the secondary and post-secondary institutions, brought them together physically, brought them together virtually, to think about a very challenging issue, which is how do you connect up 2 systems that were designed entirely separately. This has also been done at a time when the K-12 system, particularly the high schools, are redesigning their assessments. So the timing on this has really been important to inform a lot of the assessment redesign that's been going on in high school as well. It's, as I noted at the beginning, this is unique work nationally because it's been led by the post-secondary system, and this is one of the best examples that I could point to in the nation of a systemic effort, not just an episodic or just an ad hoc effort, but a systemic effort to draw the systems together and organize the activities in a way that enable all the students in your state to understand what's expected of them, what they need to do to be ready for post-secondary ed, help your post-secondary system understand how to enhance student success as the students are entering the system. So I would just commend you for your work and say it was absolutely has been our pleasure working with you over the last 4 years on this, and we continue to promote and advertise and sing your praises nationally. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you and see if you have any questions or comments.
Dennis. We're going to open up for questions. David, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that very informative talk, and congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
On slide number 7, the validity study slide, you have a number 1 under percent adjusted alignment and number 2 under cross-disciplinary, but I don't see the footnotes as to what exactly you're trying to imply or mean by that.
Sorry, yeah, adjusted alignment in math and science. We went back into the courses and we looked at, we aligned the courses first against all the standards, and then, like in science, for example, it kind of got, the alignment was low because we were aligning the physics standards against all the science standards, and we were aligning the chemistry against all the science standards. So we went back and we aligned physics to physics and chemistry to chemistry and biology to biology. And when we adjusted it, it jumped up. And the same thing in mathematics. We were aligning the math courses to all the math standards. And when you aligned the math courses to the specific standards of that course area, then it increased the alignment. So we're just trying to make it clear that in science and math, there was a kind of a 2-stage alignment process.
And you had made mention that regarding the size of the independent school districts, that there may be resource issues with regard to curriculum development. Would there really need to be that much curriculum development? It seems like you've pretty much laid out what needs to be covered, yeah. And if they just simply cover this, then the students would be ready and are able to have success at the post-secondary level.
Well, I subscribe to that theory entirely. I think the one thing that we're still dealing with is you've got a K-12 system that's given them one set of messages and a post-secondary system that's giving them a slightly different set of messages, and it's kind of trying to put those two together still.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, even though it's not our purview, there's an awful lot of curriculum development departments out there, and I'm just wondering, why does every single school district need curriculum development when we've identified the core competencies that are necessary at the next level?
What makes America great, you know. We've got local control of education, and therefore everyone, you know, I don't have any argument with you. A lot of this is, that's why the board is to be commended for coming up with college readiness assignments that can be implemented in every single school district. But the curriculum decisions are sort of, you know, by statute local, and that's the model we have. On the other hand, I think, given the kind of clout Texas has in the marketplace, that getting vendors to develop materials that could be adopted statewide is a very promising avenue, and I would assume that the TEA and the coordinating board would think about this notion of what does a high quality algebra course look like, what does a high quality biology course look like that aligns between high school and college.
Did you compare these standards to what is actually be tested on the newly adopted test that the SBOE has put out?
We haven't done that because the tests were still in development when we did all this work. And as I understand it right now, they've got a couple of the tests done, but they're still working on others.
And I've had an opportunity to talk to the commissioner telephonically about this, but I think our challenge is going to get coordination between the SBOE, the TEA, and this organization for the great work that's been done on this project. So, you know, I don't know if the commissioner's got any comments in that regard.
We work very closely with TEA. The State Board of Education, of course, is independent and has its own agenda. I think under the circumstances, we've done a pretty good job of coordinating with the K through 12 sector, but we haven't got the level of support for our college and career readiness across the state that we would like. Probably Judy could talk more about that issue, but we still have a way to go. When I talk to teacher groups that we convene, I ask how many know about our college and career readiness standards, and I'm still surprised by how many teachers don't know about the standards. And once again, local school districts develop their own notion of what constitutes college and career readiness, and we've always got a long way to go. So we've made a lot of progress. I think Professor Conley is right that we've probably made more progress than any other state, but that's not to say that we're completely successful.
Excuse me, just one other challenge that you face in terms of working with the K-12 system is that there's slightly different conceptions of knowledge. And the K-12 system has thought of knowledge as being largely at the recall level, what one can remember and what one can demonstrate that's very factual in nature and very concise and precise. And that's absolutely important information. But for college, you've got to take that information and be able to integrate it and apply it. I really think that as you're working with TEA and the State Board of Education on the specifications for the exams, hopefully there can be some space for activities that go beyond just what are called selected response tests, and others multiple choice, to some constructed responses. Students need to be able to write, they need to be able to analyze, they need to be able to integrate, they need to be able to apply, they need to be able to deal with open-ended and complex problems. They need to be able to do research and integrate information from databases. Those are things that aren't easily gotten from tests that are limited to just 4 choices. So hopefully there's some space as you're thinking about these end-of-course exams to have some activities that really do predict college readiness, but that go beyond just representation of content knowledge.
I think the point that the commissioner said is quite true. We've made a lot of inroads. Unfortunately, we have lost funding in college and career readiness with this last legislative session. Money was very tight, but work is still continuing. In a minute, I'm going to let Dr. Kramer make some comments because our work is still going through the 2013 year. But what happens with the public school systems is there are 1,100 plus systems, and they're very diversified. You've got the very small systems, which make up 500 approximately of this state. And then you've got the large, we go up to the larger systems. And so even though the concentration of our students may lie within 11 of those systems, there are still many school districts out there where the resources are minimal. They're in rural communities. They don't have the curriculum staff that the larger systems have. And so there's a lot of educating that's going to have to take place. Although having been in this career for many, many years, there was a time when there was no curriculum. And every district had to develop their own. As to where we are now with the TEKS curriculum, with the infused college and career readiness standards. So we have faced challenges all along, but somehow they've been able to address those challenges. And this is going to take much more work. It is not ended. I have two staff members, Dr. Kramer with her staff and Lynette Heckman, who is over there. You may not be able to see her because of the pillar, but Lynette is working very closely with TEA, with end of course. She is there with all their meetings, with connecting with our work, with the work that they're doing, so that that message is still delivered, which then also keeps us in tune. And Dr. Kramer, with her work and her team on the success side, is working with some of the stuff that Dr. Connolly has just referenced, because we have contracts out there with our universities that are helping us develop this and move it forth. And Kristen, you might want to inform the board about that so they'll be aware. So we're moving forth, but it's going to be very challenging because of the limitations, and TEA has taken a tremendous hit in terms of its funding and its staff, where before they had a college and career readiness unit just like we have. They no longer have it. And so that's why it's going to be interesting in the next few years, but our work cannot stop. Dr. Kramer, you may want to speak to it.
Well, I can say a couple of things. Lynette is heading up the relationship with TEA at this point in the development of the end-of-course exams. I should say that some of you may be aware that the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards were integrated into the TEKS over the past several years. I believe the math TEKS are being revised, and we are looking to see that the CCRS are better integrated there. The end-of-course exams, specifically for Algebra 2 and English 3, are very focused on the critical CCRS, so we do see evidence of the standards showing up. As far as the work that we are continuing outside of the K-12 work, obviously we have the regional special advisors here who are continuing to work with in their regions with whether it's conferences, professional development, vertical alignment work. It's a variety of activities, but those are very focused on the CCRS. The service centers, too, are doing a lot of professional development. That's why we've brought them into our conversations with the regional special advisors. Work with Lynette and I are working with UT on the next step with the college readiness assignments. This is a field test that we're doing both in high schools around the state and with two-year institutions and the 4 years. So looking at the role of the assignments in freshman level courses as well. And then lastly, we're doing work with vertical alignment in training, both with a group in North Texas, developing training for high school and college professors to work together. And that's a...
Mr. Chairman, I just had one last comment. I want to commend the work of the staff, and I did get a chance to talk to the commissioner. I think the staff's doing an exemplary job on trying to move forward. This is a very special tool that we have developed. I mean, it's a one-of-a-kind type of thing. Somehow, some way, I think the partner that's missing in this may be our board. And I would ask our chairman, both of them, is there an opportunity for us as a board to meet with the SBOE to try to help align those incentives, align this, because we're the end receiver of the product that they're delivering. And if they're delivering a product that doesn't work for our colleges and our institutions and our students that we're being entrusted to be successful, and we've got a tool that would help get us there, Is there an opportunity for us to establish a better relationship and have a dialogue with the elected leaders of the SBOE with this appointed board or this board's leadership? And I would, turn that over to Chairman's discretion if there's an opportunity there. And I'd be certainly willing to participate if there is.
You take it.
Well, the good news is there is a good relationship between the two commissioners. So we have a starting point, a foundation there, and their work is with the statewide P16 Council. I think to answer the question as to whether there's an opportunity and what initiative would be necessary, let me ask a question that I think drives at this. Is there an ongoing process to integrate the college and career readiness standards into the end of course, all of the end of course exams? I heard you mention Algebra 2 and English 3.
Right. College readiness is the focus for the English curriculum as well as for the math curriculum. If you refer to House Bill 3, there is reference made to investigating the relevance of focusing on and testing for college readiness in the other disciplines, and I can let Lynette say a little bit more specifically on that.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer is yes, both in terms of House Bill 3 mandating that TEA and the State Board of Education look at science and social studies in terms of does it make sense to have a college readiness component on those two exams. To speak to the integration of the college and career readiness standards into not only the TEKS but the end-of-course assessments, I think TEA has done a stellar job in doing that, and I think part of that has to do with the relationship between our two commissioners. But I think it's also because of the relationship that we have with the TEA staff. I think as little as probably 4 or 5 years ago, even though we had been talking with them about college and career readiness, and even after we had these standards adopted, they still didn't use the terminology a lot. I think now you will see that in terms of the staff, they mention that all the time. They're constantly talking about these standards and how that information is important in terms of the curriculum and the end-of-course assessments. And just to give you some notion of whether or not post-secondary faculty who sit on those committees, they're like vertical teams that look at the items on these end-of-course assessments. They have been very impressed with the kind of detail and the rigor at this point of those end-of-course exams in terms of measuring college and career readiness. In terms of English 3 and Algebra 2, again, the social studies and the science, we haven't moved in that direction yet. But in terms of those two end-of-course assessments, they've been very impressed across the board with the level of rigor that in terms of content and cognitive complexity of those items. And to speak to the, moving from just multiple choice kinds of answers, at least in terms of the work that's going on those two end-of-course exams, there's more open-ended questions. And in terms of the writing samples that students are having to do on the English 3, previously they had one writing component of that. Now they've moved to 2, and they're fairly complex. So I think getting the higher ed faculty involved in that process and getting their feedback on where they believe this work is headed, they've been very impressed with what's been going on.
Lynette, is that same process going to continue then to align and have the same level of rigor in the science and social studies end-of-course exams?
Yes, but because there's no college and college readiness measure on those two exams at this point, I don't think the kind of focus on those courses, I don't think it's had that kind of focus at this point. They're going to have to be doing some studies around those two content areas. And again, if there is some determination that it makes sense to have a college readiness component on those two exams, I think you'll see that.
I think here's what I'm driving at from a big picture standpoint. I think that both this board and the SBOE and our commissioners and all of the people who work so hard at both agencies. This year's ninth grade cohort is the first cohort that will take the full complement of end-of-course exams.
Correct.
And will be expected to learn and to achieve these college and career readiness standards. So I think what our boards and our agencies want to be able to say is, will this ninth grade cohort, when they graduate in 4 years with a high school degree, be prepared for college level work and career pathways? Are we able to say that today, that a Texas high school degree will actually mean you're prepared to go either into post-secondary education or a career?
I think we can say that we're getting closer to that. One of the issues you have to consider is that the college and career readiness standards that have been infused into the curriculum, the students that are in high school now didn't have the benefit of that from the K through 8. So it will take some time for the full impact of those standards permeating the full curriculum and those students having that benefit. That being said, I do think students that are coming out of high school in 2015 will be able to perform at a much higher level than they are now. And I think in large measure because of these standards, because of the work TEA has done and the State Board of Education in infusing these into the curriculum and the measures that will be in place on the end-of-course exams, all 12 of them. And what students will have to do in order to graduate. Keep in mind that the 4x4 curriculum now has been in place for a number of years. The fact that universities require that, generally, there are some exceptions to that, but generally require that students graduate under the recommended high school curriculum in order to be admitted. I think the whole system has been moving in that direction so that while, you know, a student who graduates in 2015 will do better, you'll still have some time before the full impact of this work affecting students that are entering kindergarten, who will graduate, you know, many years from now.
Let me clarify. Students that enroll in public universities are now required to have at the minimum completed the recommended high school program.
Right.
With no exceptions.
Well,
Those coming directly from high school, or that's the requirement from the last.
The ACT and there are a couple of the ACT and the SAT. If they don't have the full benefit of the recommended, they come from a private high school. It doesn't have the full recommended
We're
curriculum.
talking about publics, but I just want to make clear that our public universities are required
Right.
to have that as a minimum requirement. So I don't want the board to misunderstand that. The second point, I just want to point out that what you've just gone into, though, is it's important to point out it's not just the college and career readiness standards. It's a requirement to the recommended high school program. There's a whole series of incremental measures and policies that the board has undertaken that are coming together to make a difference. Later on, you're going to talk about a new assessment instrument potentially for developmental ed. That part of the requirements for that will be that it be in fact aligned with the college and career readiness standards, which the current instruments are not. So there are just a number of things that have to be done in connection with each other. We have to address the preparation of our educators coming out of higher ed to understand what the college and career readiness standards are. So it's really a massive effort, but it's not, you know, the standards are the centerpiece, but you have all these other items. I don't think we originally envisioned doing what Dave just described as this effort a number of years ago. Perhaps Dave did, but I don't think we saw that as a piece, but it's a critical piece to what we're doing. So, and there will probably be other things we realize as the board discusses this going forward that we need to add in to make this a complete process.
Which brings me to the point, and Lynette, I didn't expect the answer to be we're in the process of making a smooth and seamless transition to where 100% of the class of 15 will be ready.
Many of them will be.
But we are on that path to improvement, so I think the opportunity for this board is where, from a policy and strategic initiative standpoint, do we still need to focus to bring it to fruition so that not far beyond the class of 15, a high school diploma actually means you're ready for college-level work or career training. And consequently, we pretty much do away with the need for nearly half of developmental education by achieving that. So that, I would challenge Commissioner, you and David and Judy, we need to hear from you. Where does this board, through our policy involvement and leadership, where do we need to engage and help, the ball continue moving down the field? And we may be approaching the red zone, but we're not in the end zone yet.
If I may, one of the things you're going to have over the next few years is a lot more data. And all of this system is setting you up to have more information. I mean, these college and career, the component of the TEKS exams that are going to have the college readiness component, that's more information. As David mentioned, you're going to have a new test that will give you information relative to developmental ed. You can go beyond a high school grade point average, which, as you know, is problematic because of weightings and all sorts of other things. It's really, and the variation that teachers have in how they give grades. You're going to have some more stable measures, and you're going to be able to use that information to develop what looks a whole lot more like a profile than a cut point. And the profile is useful because students go to so many different futures that you don't want to have one standard for everybody. That makes no sense in a state where you want to have more people go to college, not fewer. So I would say one of your strategic initiatives is really to put in place the data gathering and the analytic processes that help you to interpret the information that's going to be coming out of your system now and use that information for two purposes. One is, of course, for status decisions like whether someone gets admitted to program A or program B, but the other purpose is to send actionable information back to high schools and to students and to parents about what steps they need to be taking to be more college ready. What you don't want to do is have students go all the way through the system collecting all these test scores, get to the very end and find out if they're college ready or not. What you want is for them to be thinking about that all along. You also want your high schools to realize where they're doing a good job and where they're not doing a good job and use that information really to help and then they can pull the college readiness assignments, they can do other things to help make a difference and change what they're doing so that more students become ready. So you've created all of the elements for a continuous improvement process here. And I think that would be hopefully one of the strategic initiatives is really working with the secondary system on a continuous improvement process.
Dr. Conley, let me ask one more sort of follow-up question. One of the things that sometimes we as a board and an agency struggle with is the messaging that we use about a college-going culture, college readiness standards. And the intent is not to take the focus off of CTE or its importance. We have many industries that have brought a real focus on not every student needs a bachelor's degree to work for us, but they need certain types of technical training, certificates, associate's degrees. Can you help this board understand how the alignment and validation process was as, there are different approaches and metrics that were used. Help us understand how that process was just as rigorous and thorough for CTE as it was for the academic courses.
Well, with the CTE courses, what you find is that the content knowledge that's required is going to be more specialized. So what you don't want to do is take a CTE course and compare it to everything that you need to know in English, because when you start looking at literature, well, there aren't a lot of accounting courses that require a lot of literature. But it doesn't mean that an accounting course doesn't require some understanding of language and some understanding of how to communicate in written forms. Even though accounting is largely about numbers, there's still reports that go with it and so forth. So when we did our analysis, we wanted to make sure that we were matching up, that we were comparing apples to apples, and that you were seeing in the areas where there's a content knowledge expectation, how did that match up with the college and career readiness standards, and was it at a level consistent with those standards? The other part we looked at, and what I reported to you here, is when we looked at the cross-disciplinary standards, do those CTE courses require a lot of these kind of generic skills of being able to know how to learn, being able to know how to study, being able to write well, being able to organize information, be able to do some research? Increasingly, what you find is CTE courses require a set of learning skills that aren't a whole lot different than the skills that are required for your bachelor's degree. So what you don't want to do in a high school is decide that one group of kids are learning how to work with their hands and another group is learning how to work with their heads. Everyone's got to work with their heads, and then people have different levels of focus with that information. Now, when you go into a bachelor's degree program, there's general education, which is pretty broad. When you go into a certificate program or a career pathway, you start focusing down on the content. But in both areas, you're using a set of thinking skills and learning skills that are pretty similar.
I'd like to say something to this too. The studies that they did, that EPIC did for us on the CTE courses, it was the same methodology that was used for the validation using the academic courses. Added to that, Dr. Conley didn't speak much today about the CTE Plus study, and this was looking at career pathways, both an IT pathway and nursing associates, and looking at all of the courses for those pathways. And those, in that study, and correct me if I'm wrong here, in that study, EPIC also looked at the content standards, not just the cross-disciplinary. And there we found a very high alignment for the content standards, which meant that by the end of a nursing degree, that student would need to have mastered the majority of the CCRS in order to be successful, so in all of the content areas. So that really speaks again to Dr. Conley's point.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. Thank you.
You might also speak to the Lexile studies on the textbooks, for the CTE textbooks.
Oh, we did that in 2008. We commissioned Metametrics, who does both a quantile and a reading assessment, and we had them look at textbooks just in terms of the Lexile or the reading level to determine, our CTE textbooks and academic textbooks, how complex are they? And discovered that one of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of the K-12 higher ed alignment issue is that the textbooks at the higher ed level are higher in terms of reading level than high school textbooks. And so that could be part of the disconnect between public ed and higher ed in terms of the expectation in terms of the reading level of those kinds of textbooks. So we do have that information that we've shared with our regional college readiness special advisors. They use that information too in terms of their work and in our alignment work.
Well, and we found especially that many of the CTE textbooks were much more difficult than many of the textbooks that were being used in your standard academic pathway. So you weren't getting off the hook in being able to be a very strong reader. So.
And there's just one thing I'd like to add about the end of course piece before we get off of this, that we have invited several meetings, and it just hasn't happened, it just hasn't worked out, to have Dr. Chris Clute and Dr. Gloria Ziskowski from TEA present to the board on the end of course work that they've been doing. So we intend to have them present to you at some point to give you their perspective on where they are with that whole process and how how that's moving forward. So they will come to the board and give a presentation on that work.
I'd like to ask one brief question, if I could, and then we'll wrap this up and move on to the next item. What I'm concerned about and what's interesting to me is that we're developing these standards within secondary education, but in order to be successful in secondary education, you've got to be successful in junior high and elementary school, and I understand that involves the vertical alignment. And from what y'all are telling me, it sounds like to me that the individual ISDs are going to be responsible for developing their curriculum in elementary and junior high. Is that correct?
Well, the State Board
nothing that we're doing is going to dictate what kind of curriculums are going to be to prepare these students for secondary education.
The State Board of Education has the responsibility for the curriculum, but in terms of how it applies in the local school district, It is local control. Now, do we have some influence in that? Yes, we do. And we're working, especially through our faculty collaboratives, in terms of the new teachers coming out of our colleges of education, so that they understand that these standards, the impact of those standards all the way through the curriculum, not just in high school, but all the way down to kindergarten. And I think it is important to know that in terms of the testing, the complete STAR assessment system that TEA is developing, that one of the things they have to do is back all of this assessment down to kindergarten, so that there is a measure that, you know, a student taking the first grade, is it first grade or third grade?
Third grade.
Third grade test. Third grade test. That the student is ready for the next level, and then they take the fourth grade test, they're ready for the next level. So they back map this all the way down through the curriculum and through the assessment to ensure that students who end up at the senior level are graduating ready for college, but it ties all of that down through the elementary curriculum. So I do think that they are doing that. But again, the work does occur at the individual district level in terms of teachers that are in the classroom now, getting them up to speed in terms of these new standards and what that means in terms of the curriculum and the assessment all the way down through elementary school.
This is where the college and career readiness standards are so unique and so powerful, is that they allow for this what's called back mapping as you map it downward. The way schools have tended to work is the opposite. They've just sort of taken kids as they've come in and said, well, what are they able to do in kindergarten, what can they do in first grade, what can they do in second grade? And they've actually just built the system going upward, not downward. As much as they've talked about doing it the other way around, it hasn't been done that way. This the college and career readiness standards, and then things like the college readiness assignments and so forth, allow you to start thinking about going, really thinking, what is it? Where do you have to be by 8th grade? Where do you have to be by 6th grade? Where do you have to be by 4th grade? And that language, that dialogue, that discussion is now permeating the public schools to a much greater degree. Where do our students need to be? That's the first step. Then the curriculum development will follow.
Yeah, the way I see it is, unless we put certain things in place, then we're not necessarily doing anything other than changing the position that child is in when, not a certain segment, when they begin to experience failure. As it occurs now, they're getting into freshman post-secondary education, and then they're experiencing failure. And then, but if we don't make sure that they're learning what they need to be learning in elementary and junior high, then we're just going to be moving it down to secondary education, and then that's when they're going to experience failure and drop out. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like to me that it's going to be vitally important that our vertical integration is effective, and that we make sure that what they learn in elementary school is going to serve them well when they get into junior high, and then when they finish junior high, that they're secondary ready. Otherwise, all we're doing is moving the needle down a couple grades, and they get frustrated and fail at a lower point within the system. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yes, school districts are recognizing that the alignment between middle school and high school is just as important and just as difficult as between high school and college.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
Is that, but making sure that they're prepared every step of the way, and not just between secondary and college.
And to be fair, I think the educational service centers, the fact that we have 2 of them represented on our regional college readiness special advisors, they are responsible in large measure, maybe not for the very large districts, but they are responsible for professional development across the state for teachers. And so the work that they are doing, the 20 educational service centers, in preparing teachers who are in the classroom now to be ready for those, not just the end-of-course assessments, but all the STAR assessments. They're working very hard on ensuring that our teachers that are in the classroom now are prepared to teach students to that level. So I do think that it's a huge job, and I think all along the way, TEA, the Educational Service Center, State Board of Education, I think, and us, we're all trying to do our piece of that.
Does anyone else on the board have, David?
I just had a double follow-up question. Who tracks the post-secondary school success relative to the secondary school that they graduated from? Is there any agency that does that? Or do we track where these high schools are that our students came from? Because it seems to me that we're asking them to, yeah, you got local control, but we need to give those school districts a report card. The product you gave to us failed at such and such a rate.
Information has been provided to the public schools for a number of years on their performance on developmental ed, how their students are doing, if they're required to take developmental education or not. It's not been clear they've used that information, but we've been doing it for, I guess, 20 years now. The board made a decision a number of years ago not to make those public reports, but those reports are in place. That they're not quite as useful as they used to be because of changes in FERPA regulations at the federal government, which reduced the ability to provide as direct information on individual students and their performance. I would like to add that the projects we have, the pathways in Bexar County and Houston and El Paso we've been working with, actually sits down. We have special agreements with them to provide data. The local school districts, community colleges, and universities in the area are able to actually, with our helps and some additional data provided by them, look at the performance of individual students and make changes. At our April board meeting, we had San Jacinto College and one of the local school districts talk about changes that were actually made in this school district based upon that analysis. We're hoping to expand that to other districts, I think 28 school districts in the Valley.
We're beginning right now in the Valley.
Okay. We've had interest from Fort Worth. It's primarily a resource issue, but this is something that we're developing to enable people at the local level who can actually make changes in their programs, who can address the curriculum to see where their programs are working and not working, and we're finding that to be very successful. And we're hoping at some point we'll be in the position where every district in the state can take advantage of that system.
You know, the FERPA issue aside, is there, and this is probably not the time to discuss this, but is there a point where we would consider public reporting of this information in the aggregate with the private information redacted, so that essentially these public schools would be essentially getting a grade on how well their graduates did?
What could be done right now, I believe, is to report in aggregate how their students were performing across all the institutions they attend. Then you don't have the issue in terms of small cell sizes. You'd have at least, except for the very smallest districts, you would be able to address the FERPA requirements in that fashion. Bill agrees, I see. So we could do something like that. That's really something that the previous board had not wanted to do, but at a different level, but you may choose to at this time. We have different capabilities, frankly, now than we had many years ago when that decision was made to do this in a way that would be meaningful. I will add that for a number of years, we also have on our website, you can also go in, you can get some of the performance information. You can also tell where students from any individual high school are going to college, unless it, again, is less than five or less. So you can get some understanding of the college going rate by individual high school as well. And so we look for those opportunities. That actually came out of one reporter in Houston wanting to know that for a handful of schools. And when we looked at that, we thought we should do it for the whole state. So rather than just producing the data for him, we did it for the entire state, and we've been putting that on the web now for 10 years. Just to add to it, you should know that we provide a similar report to community colleges about the performance of their students when they transfer to universities and the grades they earn at those universities.
Let me just do my semi-annual reminder that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make them drink. So having data on our website is not the same thing as informing the public. So there may be, as we experienced with the very positive response to the almanac that we produced comparing our institutions of higher learning, there may be a similar thing we can do with that data that we've got in terms of putting it in the hands of the public and the policymakers.
I absolutely agree that a website alone is passive, and we've talked about that as staff quite a lot. And there are other things we are doing as well. You should know that we've instituted a Data Fellows program where we're bringing in people from school districts to teach them about the data and make them more aware of the data. And we've found that a large improvement in terms of at least the knowledge of what's happening with their students in those districts, where we've brought those individuals in for a week and trained them. And in fact, we've changed some of what we're doing based upon their advice as well in terms of what's useful to school districts and what isn't. But I think that we're at the point now that we know enough that we could provide data in different kinds of ways that would be meaningful, and we can prepare some options like that for you if you wish.
I think first of all, I agree with David's point there. I think that information would be very valuable. I think the question is, how can we most effectively communicate that in such a way where we can begin to move people in a direction where they can be held more accountable for the performance of individual districts. One of the things that we may want to consider is I continually am surprised of when I talk with individual trustees in the various independent school districts about how much that they don't know about how their individual schools are performing. So if there was a means in which we could get this information in the hands of the trustees, not only in the ISDs, but in the community colleges, because a lot of the information that I see them getting has been filtered down through their superintendent. And the superintendent is, and oftentimes telling them the things that he wants them to know, and it's not always the whole story. So if there was a newsletter or some means that we could actually put in the hands of the decision makers within the ISDs and community colleges of how their individual institutions are performing, then I think that would raise awareness among those decision makers as to how their students are doing when they leave there. And that may be something we may want to think about, David.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I will ask Dr. Tusher wants to make a motion to that effect that we make this report card published. I will second that.
I'm not sure we can do that because it's not on the agenda, but I certainly don't have a problem with us moving in that direction. It may be something that our chairman could work on and maybe make an appointment.
Well, I think we can ask
I'd like to do it with some
staff
input.
to develop
a
response to the clear interest of the board here and a recommendation
Yeah,
that we could have
can-
on an agenda.
We'd be
soon.
glad to bring something to the next committee meeting, a proposal.
I would like to see if we could get the staff to make a recommendation to this committee. You've heard what our concerns are. If y'all could make a recommendation, and then I'll leave whatever appointment that needs to be made to the chairman with regard to any individual from this committee that might have an interest in pursuing this. Is that agreeable? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. The one thing in addition to that, I ask if the information we already have on our website, if you could send us the hyperlinks so we can actually go and look at it, because I've been told by superintendents this data doesn't exist, and if we've already published it, I'd certainly like to see it, and I know there's 7 board members in my city that would like to see it too. That last question I had, and I'll stop asking questions. Now that we've finished our 4-year journey with EPIC, this is obviously a continuous improvement process. Is it going to stay within this agency? Who is going to be responsible for this? When do these measures need to be relooked at? I mean, is it a continuous process, or is it every 3 years we look at a different standard? Or
It's going to be a continuous process, but I'm going to yield to Judy to answer that, if that's agreeable, or David. Judy, would you answer that?
Yes, and it is a continual process, and it will have to be revisited, and Lynette can probably speak to this because of the work with End of Course.
In terms of what the State Board of Education does, about every 10 years they review the K-12 curriculum. Now they're in the process of looking at the math standards, and will fully incorporate the standards into that process. But in terms of the standards themselves, it's my understanding there's nothing that precludes us from going through the process again of looking at these standards, because is it fair to say that once you've adopted standards, they're good for the next 50 years? Probably not. Do we need to go through this process again? Probably at some point. We need to revisit the college and career readiness standards to ensure that they are still current, and then go through this process again. So the work is continuous with TEA and the Coordinating Board, the State Board of Education, in terms of ensuring that what we have adopted is accurately reflected in the curriculum and the end-of-course assessments. To that, the TEA, in cooperation with the Coordinating Board, this is in statute, every 3 years we are charged to do some studies to ensure that the assessments that are occurring in K-12 are appropriate. So we will continually do studies to ensure that those assessments are hitting the mark. So that is a continuous process. So I would say yes, this is ongoing.
Just as a point of reference, I was on the California Commission on Academic Standards and Performance Standards in 1997 through 1999, and probably Dr. Connolly knows this, California's just revised its academic standards, so they're doing a 10 or 12-year cycle. I think that's fairly common.
Okay, in the interest of time, this information was, this item on the agenda was for information purposes only, doesn't require action of this committee. I would once again like to thank Dr. Conley for the fine work that he's done, and I certainly appreciate your efforts in being here today, along with the Coordinating Board staff. Thank you, and we appreciate the hard work, and it looks like we're well on our way to doing some things that are going to be very beneficial for our students. Thank you. At this point, we'll move on to item number 4, which is report and discussion of legislative mandates related to developmental education, including Texas Success Initiative assessments, alignment with the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards. Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale, Director of the Developmental Education and Adult Basic Education in the Division of P through 16 Initiatives, will make this presentation of this item at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to interrupt a second, and you all officially met Dr. Morales-Vale when she came on board, but this, I think, is her first presentation before you, and I told her you need to get used to it. So because she's been doing so much work with what she's going to speak to, it is an information item to bring you up to speed so you will know what's going to transition in the next months. But she joined us 2 months ago and has just hit the road running, and we're just delighted to have her on board.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here today.
Now you have to be entertaining, though. That's the only pressure.
I just want to let the committee know that the RFP is being finalized as we speak, and it is on the agenda to be routed today, to go through the routing process later on today. We've had extensive consultation with Dr. Susan Phillips, who is a psychometrician and a nationally renowned assessment expert, and we've gotten a lot of excellent advice from her. Lynette, I think she took off, but she also was integral in this review. So that's kind of where we stand right now, and if you look at the timeline on the second page there, you can see that we are looking to post. There is a slight change as far as posting the TSI assessment. It looks like we're going to move that to January 13th, but we still have the proposals due on February 3rd. We were told by our colleagues that the posting rule is 21 days, and so we've backed that 21 days from the February 3rd proposal deadline. We have a Developmental Education Advisory Committee who is going to be working hand in hand with us to determine the quality of the proposals, as well as national assessment experts who are also going to be helping us in that, with that endeavor. And we expect a demonstration from the finalist proposals to be given the first weeks of March. And we expect to have a recommendation to the committee, as you can see by the timeline there, by March 21st, and the coordinating board recommendation by April 26th. The award we expect to occur in May, and we expect the field testing to begin in fall 2012. After the field testing, we will, of course, have our reliability and validity findings, which will help inform a recommendation to the committee and to the board with full implementation, including the single standard, for fall 2013.
Anyone have any questions at this point?
This is part of the legislative mandate under developmental education that we are governed by, and ultimately the recommendation, as Dr. Vail says, will be coming to the commissioner. We contracted with experts to be working with us because of the sensitivity of this when the final selection is made, and then in addition to the setting of that standard. So it's a pretty involved process, and she's done a yeoman's job to oversee this and move it forward. So
the field testing, what percentage of DevEd students will the field testing sample or will gain experience with this?
That is something that we're going to take recommendations from the assessment experts, including Dr. Phillips, once we get to the finalist component of this process, and she will make recommendations as far as, you know, the validity in terms of the number of sample institutions that need to be involved and the number of students that need to be involved, and we have to be assured that those minimal sample levels are definitely met. So we'll be, you know, further, it's definitely an ongoing process, and there'll be several stages, and we'll be taking recommendations from the assessment experts in terms of helping us guide through that process, through the field testing process. And of course also informed by the testing companies, the finalist companies, and their extensive teams who have experience in this as well.
So,
keep in mind that the field testing is in fall, which will hit the largest number of students, coming into the institutions. And so if they deem that we would test every student coming in, then your population is even larger. So that's why it's a fall test.
And as the word gets...
We're not just going to select 2 or 3 institutions.
Oh, no.
No, absolutely not. And as the word gets out, I've already been fielding questions from institutions who are ready and willing to be part of this field test.
Since an earlier analysis found that the THEA was the most well-aligned of the existing assessments, I'm curious, is our RFP drafted that we're going to expect a different result? Is it drafted that we're going to expect an assessment that is more custom and tailored than any of the existing standardized assessments?
Yes, absolutely. They're going to be aligned not only with the college career and readiness standards, but as you can see from the page 1 of the description, we also want to go ahead and align them with adult basic education, the National Reporting Systems Educational Functioning Level descriptors. And so basically the way we envision this is a seamless process for students to take the test. First step is to determine college readiness, and once that has been determined by the computer adaptive testing and questioning process, then the test is over, the student is finished, and is deemed college ready. If not, if for example, the number of questions that have been answered incorrectly, then it goes into the second level, and that level will determine the readiness for and the various levels of developmental education. And once that has been determined, it also will go into a diagnostic mode so that the end report that the student receives is not only what level of developmental education, level 1 or level 2, but also the specific learning outcomes that should be addressed in order to bring that student up to college ready. Then, if those level of questioning is not satisfactory, according to the computer adaptive standards, it goes further down into the adult basic education level, and it will make a determination at what level the student is in that realm.
Okay, well, I think that answers my other question. So obviously it won't be aimed at a cutoff point. It'll be aimed at identifying the breadth and depth of what each student actually needs.
Yes, that's how this is different is that it not only makes a recommendation for placement and provides a report for placement, but it further goes into the diagnostic level, and it also includes the recommendation for adult basic education.
The other thing, too, Mr. Chairman, is that Interestingly enough, there are companies out there just waiting to submit and prepare this proposal, so they
Will
know.
they pay us to do it?
Well, the other thing, too, they've certainly tracked the law and the legislation, so they know what the requirements are. So we're just, we're anxiously waiting to put it forward and then see what comes forward.
Raymond?
This is a hugely important issue for the board, and it will be a very sensitive issue that will be watched very closely by community colleges. So we're going to make sure that we get this right. One of the things I haven't seen the RFP yet, but one of the things I wanted to raise is maybe one of the things we ought to ask. The firms that apply for this contract is to look at the feasibility of different levels of developmental education, because, as you know, there's a growing body of research that shows that putting students at different levels has been a failure, and that it extends the time that students can remain in developmental education. Maybe we ought to raise a question of whether we should have 2 levels of developmental education, or we ought to combine the two and try to shorten the amount of time that students spend in.
Absolutely. The description of the Developmental Education Advisory Committee, there is a team that is a segment of this committee. It's the Rules Committee, the TSI Rules team, and they will be looking at issues just like that. And what we're possibly looking at, for example, is 2 levels of developmental education, with the highest level actually mandating concurrent enrollment in the college credit course, with, of course, a variety of options for developmental education, simultaneous interventions. And the second level then can be obviously at a lower level without the concurrent enrollment, but building up to that preparation.
There's also, of this task force, Commissioner, there is a research team that will be looking at what we are doing in the field to determine what is the best practice, and also could include that kind of recommendation that Dr. Vail is talking about.
And again, from response from the field, they are very excited about the possibility of this new assessment, and I'm hearing a lot of very good things from the field.
The delay also, in the reason that before it gets officially posted, it has to go to the comptroller's office because of the amount of money that could be generated for any company that would get this contract. So there is a process that we have to follow before it is let, and the commissioner will be the ultimate person that reads once it's gone through the channels, he then will have a chance to review the entire RFP.
No, this is going to be a real hot topic within our community college systems. What I'd like to ask, and I don't know you're the appropriate person to ask this, but if my memory serves me correct, only one person now that enters developmental education in the state of Texas goes on to complete one level of college level course after going through the system that was presently in place. In other words, 1 out of 4 will go on and take a college level course for credit and be successful. So the system that we have now, in my opinion, is not working. Now, what are we going to do, and how is this proposal and this topic that we're discussing today going to fix that? Because we're obviously not doing a real good job of what we're doing when we look at those numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay, is that a fair question?
Yes, absolutely, it is a fair question.
She's exactly the right person.
Okay, that's the reason I ask it.
I think, and I think we've been doing a lot of prep work, and in my meetings that I've been having with various organizations and giving them the information. And by the way, a lot of this process has definitely been, in my opinion, has been aided by the legislative mandates.
Absolutely.
It's been huge, and it's also not only in getting the information out, but also preparing institutions for change. And I think the key in improving developmental education is acceleration. And that's why I said one of the things that we are looking at is considering, some institutions have as many as 5 and 6 levels of some of these subject areas. And granted, they're probably not doing a very good job of differentiating between their adult basic education and developmental education students, but we hope this assessment will certainly help us in that area. But again, it's acceleration. And if we have 2 levels where we do allow for that student who has been out of school for a number of years, and I think the focus really will be with those students mostly, if the STAR processes and end-of-course exams are going to do what we hope they're going to do. We're talking about adult students who have maybe been out of school for a number of years. And so I think that second level is and of course we'll be informed by findings, but that may still be necessary. But that upper level of developmental education is actually concurrent enrollment in a credit-bearing course. And so, for example, if the student tests into developmental education writing, then that student will be enrolled in English 1301 and some sort of developmental education intervention. And there is a continuum of possibilities that institutions have to be able to determine what that best intervention is. Equally important is also our efforts in integrating reading and writing. And there's a lot of research out there, including the latest, the gentleman from Texas Tech. His name escapes me right now, but I recently attended a DevEd conference in Houston, and he gave a presentation, and he talked about integration of reading and writing, and that certainly is a feasible option backed by research, especially for the upper levels. And institutions are even asking us, what about the lower levels? Can we integrate as well? Absolutely. So that this rules team is also going to be looking at that possibility. And so again, I think the key is acceleration, giving them the help that they need, but also at the same time, as quickly as possible, giving them that college credit experience, and so that they know that they are truly college students and these are the expectations that they are expected to meet.
The other thing, too, Mr. Chairman, is all of our work that we've done over the last year and a half with our demo sites, with the projects that were funded for the total redesign of developmental education, which Dr. Vail is overseeing. And so we're not only learning about assessment and placement, you're learning about that advising process, the monitoring process, the redesign of curriculum. So it's a full package that will be coming together, and you'll be hearing more about this after August when all this data has been compiled. So,
one of the things, and this is just a personal observation, and I know there's probably not a lot we can do about this because this particular decision is made at a local level, but what I've oftentimes seen in community colleges with regard to developmental education is they don't pick the best teachers to teach these kids. The kids that are smart and bright, almost anybody can teach them, but the kids that are challenged, they end up having oftentimes the teachers that tend to not to excel in the classroom. And there's a cultural problem in our community colleges in a lot of situations where we need to really, I think, put the most effective teachers teaching the most difficult students are the ones that perhaps are the furthest behind. Can we impact that at all? Is there anything that we can do to impact that?
Yes, and by the way,
is there a specialty within education that will direct or teach or train professionals to go into that setting and teach those students that are academically behind?
By the way, the gentleman's name was Hunter Boylan. I would definitely want to give credit to his work. But in answer to your question, yes, something that we are looking at, and we are working with Texas State to help us with this, is the possibility of a developmental education credential, which will be available to anyone teaching developmental education and will ensure that certain outcomes and certain levels of experience and strategy, student engagement, and those types of things are addressed, and it would be an ongoing type of process to be involved in. But that's one thing we're looking at. But another thing, and Dr. Laredo, you can address this as well, and same thing, we had, there's some assumptions made about the people who are teaching developmental education. And as we found when we looked at some of the data, actually some of those are really myths, that the faculty teaching developmental have very similar years of teaching experience and also even levels of education as our college credit faculty. And we just recently looked at a report from Susan Brown's group, and she validated that. So
it's good to hear.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything that they would like to ask or bring up, comment at this point? Again, this particular item agenda does not require action on the part of this committee. It's for information purposes only. Dr. Vail, we want to welcome you, to our boardroom. We're looking forward to seeing a lot of you in the future. I think you've got your work cut out for you, but we have all the confidence in the world that you'll be a shining star within this agency.
Thank you.
if
And I'm
not now, in the
absolutely looking forward to the
not-too-distant
challenge.
future. Thank you so much for being here. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to item agenda 5, which is an overview of funding, governance, and function of the College and Career Readiness Initiative faculty collaborates. We're going to ask Dr. Arcelia Ortez, Director of Education Quality in the Division of P through 16 Initiatives. She is here to present those items, and she's been before this board before, so she's not a new face. We're glad that you're here this morning. Thank you for being here.
Did you punch the little button, Araceli?
Good morning.
Yeah. Okay.
At the request of one of our board members, we were asked to bring forth a brief presentation, an overview of the funding, governance, and function of the College and Career Readiness Initiative, Texas Faculty Collaboratives. It's a very long title, and we did it that way to tie the two pieces, the fact that it's related to the College and Career Readiness Initiative and the fact that we're focusing on the collaboration of faculty. As part of the comprehensive approach that was mentioned by Dr. Conley in his presentation about CCRI, he did address the fact that it's important to look at many different elements of the preparation of the system towards this college and career readiness. And so this item, this project, focuses on the professional development of faculty at our public institutions, our universities, and how they prepare future educators. This is the only funding that we had towards this goal, and so you will see through the background information and the process how it is that we've tried to make the best use of this in a way that could be sustainable. The faculty collaboratives, as I shall refer to them, were established in 2009, again to provide faculty at institutions of higher education who prepare pre-service teachers with the latest information and resources on the college and career readiness standards. The collaboratives were designed to ensure that those prospective teachers would receive as much of the current information as we had to allow them to be prepared by the time they came out to teach. They wouldn't have to begin then finding out about the intent of these standards, the process by which they could teach to become better instructors, better teachers. And so the way to do that, we looked back into the system and we said we need to make sure the faculty are prepared, and then we need to provide the faculty with more and better resources so that they can then prepare their pre-service teachers. Now, who are the pre-service teachers? They're not identified as only being, here are the individuals that will become teachers. Many of them, and most of them, are going to be in all of the general education classes. So when we talk about preparation of pre-service teachers, we're not just talking about the faculty that are involved in education-type courses, the advanced courses to get a teacher ready, but really all of the faculty, especially in the 4 content areas. Now, the operational work of the faculty collaboratives is contracted to 4 primary investigators at 4 universities: Texas State University at San Marcos, the University of Texas at Arlington, the University of Texas at Austin, and the Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. These 4 PIs lead in working with an advisory group, staff, and our own staff here at the coordinating board to define appropriate program offerings for the faculty. They review faculty contributions, and they share resources and news. We established a website to allow for this sustainable model of how do we get the most impact to faculty. In the beginning, in 2008, we only held 4 seminars, and we invited faculty to come to these seminars. They found that it was extremely useful. It was a great program. They went away with ideas of what to do, but we realized that we had only impacted about 500 individuals, a very short way into meeting the needs of all of the faculty. So we decided that a web portal would be a good way to enhance this type of experience, to begin to upload presentations, webinars, resources, news, links, as much information as possible so that other faculty would also benefit. This is called the Texas Faculty Collaboratives website. It is noted there at the bullet point at the bottom of the first page, and it's a tool that we market, that we encourage faculty to visit, to learn more about what is happening. The website authoring, however, the updates and the upload of resources is only performed by the 4 PIs. So even though it's a tool, we're really pushing information at this point. Once information begins to be developed, we set up a system where if any faculty member is interested in developing a presentation, a paper, a resource that they believe would be helpful, they send it to one of the 4 faculty collaboratives PI to review and for them to consider, is this a good resource that we could share on the website? Through this process of having website, portal, a virtual community on this website portal, as well as continuing many events across the state of Texas, many small workshops focused on different content in the 4 areas, mathematics, science, English language arts, and social studies, as well as the cross-curricular standards. We have encouraged and supported the efforts of this type of professional collaboration across the state. As a result, affecting over 2,500 faculty that we know physically have participated in these events, and a growing number of them that participate digitally via the website. Now, in this last year, we've seen a great number of new resources being proposed and faculty wanting to share their ideas, their findings, how they're using these standards to prepare teachers, to prepare their general students. And so we have found that it's important to improve our process as how we determine what materials are shared and how they are shared. And here I wanted to point out 2 additional points that we're going to be adding in order to keep the quality assurance of the materials that are posted. Most importantly, for relevance, we want to make sure that the materials that are being proposed are relevant to the needs of our original goal, because once we get faculty involved in all of these different areas, the breadth of their interest can be very, very wide, and perhaps it might stray from what we're trying to do, which is really always focused on college and career readiness standards, utilizing those in the classroom to prepare teachers, and anything that has to do with improving instructional practices is particularly encouraged. So I will mention the 2 points that we've added, that we are adding to the process. Number 1, a reviewer's checklist is being developed for the use of the faculty collaborative PI as they determine what materials are relevant for posting. And number 2, any major or substantial work, we ask that they bring it to a quarterly meeting, which has been established since the very beginning, a live meeting where myself and Dr. Barnes, as the representative staff from the coordinating board, lead, along with the 4 PIs. We've asked them to bring any major types of resources for our review, again, so that we can determine if this is a substantial work, do they require any kind of additional support, is there any other related material that we know of that we want to make sure ties into that, and even if there are other staff or other experts that would benefit in participating in taking a look at that material and providing input. So those are 2 additional points that we want to add to this process. We are funded only through the end of 2013, so we know that the funding here is not going to be forever, so the focus is really on this digital sustainable model, because we will not have additional funds after 2013 to continue hosting the live meetings that the faculty have found so helpful. However, we're encouraging that more universities and faculties at the universities will continue some of these efforts on their own and perhaps leverage other types of initiatives that are related. Any questions?
David?
Yeah, as you, the funding runs out, who's going to have ownership of the website? Is it going to be the principal investigators? Because I see you've got it broken down. Each of them have a different subject matter or material there.
With when the funding ends, those principal investigators will have no additional fund to support their staff that is reviewing or participating in this. I imagine that at a very minimal cost, we can certainly keep the website running. The hosting space is less than $100, but I don't foresee that there would be a process that would continue to refresh that web portal, unless there would be another funding stream of some related sort, or some university would want to volunteer to staff and review and continue this.
Any other questions or comment? I want to thank you for making that presentation today to the board.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here.
No problem.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 6A and 6B, which we had originally placed on the consent calendar. I've been told that those need to be moved off the consent calendar, presented to the board for a vote. Item 6A is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing Chapter 13, Subchapter J, Section 13.187, of the rules or board rules concerning the Texas Fund for Geography Education, Senate Bill 5, 82nd Texas Legislature during the regular session. I'll yield the floor to Judy for any comments or perhaps answer any questions.
This is a report and process that we've had in place that Dr. Barnes has been overseeing. That really, it was a task that we had to do in submitting a report to the governor and the advisory board and moving it forth, and they have repealed it. So since we had rules, we've got to repeal the rules in being compliant with Senate Bill 5. So that's what we're doing.
Motion's been made. Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Motion carries.
We're going to get to eliminate anything else?
Yes, one more item.
One more.
Or move on just these?
Second item, agenda 6B, was also placed on the consent calendar, and it's in front of you. I'm not going to read it, but it also involves us changing the rules.
Move adoption.
Motion's been made. Second.
Second.
Motion's made, seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries. We are closing in on, or get close to finishing this meeting. Item agenda 6, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee to authorize the board chair and the chair of the committee on closing the gaps to approve the adult basic education and post-secondary education report. Dr. Linda Uzon, I know I didn't pronounce that right, Senior Program Director of Adult Basic Education in the Division of P through 16 Initiative, will present this item.
Mr. Chairman, we decided to bring this item before you. It is a work in progress because it is the work of 3 agencies. Putting it together, it is due to the governor's office or into the process in January, but I wanted Dr. Munoz to give you the preliminary findings of where they are before it is moved forward for the 2 of you to read, and certainly through the process of the agency. It's more complex when 3 agencies are putting a report together than when it's just one. So, Dr. Munoz.
Good afternoon. I can skip really fast to do this because I think your time is pretty tight. But this is addressing Rider 29, that is an update, is asking, basically it's an update of Rider 45 from the last session. And the first page here is just talking about what the rider is in summary. And the purpose is to significantly increase the number of basic skills and ABE students transitioning to post-secondary education and training programs. Which one do I press? This one? Thanks. Rider 29, like Rider 45, asks that 8 points be addressed in this action plan, and the 8 points are here. Rider 45, in the next PowerPoint. Rider 45 is on our website. It's called Building Bridges to Success, an action plan. There were 6 recommendations in this report, and the last bullet there sort of just fell off. I think somebody called me or something, and I didn't finish it. But there were 6 recommendations in Rider 45. However, one of the issues with Rider 45 is who was going to do what and when was not included. We had a when, but we didn't necessarily have a who and specifically what, like what tasks were going to be done point by point in order to get this action plan actually moving. So what this Rider 29 is going to include is basically a plan, a little bit more detailed plan that says which agency is doing what have they been doing, what have we been doing over the last 2 years, because we have been moving forward in this over the last 2 years, but I think there needs to be a real specific plan on dates and who's doing what and when things are going to be delivered and how they're going to be evaluated. And so this part of the report that I'm doing now on Rider 29 is working with TWC and TEA to look at what we've already been doing and be sure that I understand what everybody's been doing separately and what we're doing as a group, and then they'll have to approve that action plan before it's actually put into the report. Okay? Looking at this, part of the report also is looking at these 6 recommendations. And when you look at the 6 recommendations, Rider 29 and the action plan incorporate most of these 6 recommendations. There's a couple that will have to be built in with this current report. So there are the 6 recommendations. If you have any questions about specific recommendations, or I can just jump through each recommendation and tell you what's happening now, just update you on each of those recommendations. Would you like that? I'm just not sure about your time. So the first recommendation, provide funds to coordinate and expand delivery. Well, we don't have funds to coordinate and expand delivery of adult basic ed in every community college district in Texas. Okay? There are 27 community college districts that now have adult basic ed funds through the federally funded programs. However, you know, what we did do is use Rider 56 money from the last legislative session to put out an RFA for integrated basic skills and certificate training programs, and we awarded 14 grants out of those funds, and 9 of those grants are do not have federally funded adult ed programs, so they had to partner with federally funded adult ed programs. So we're moving towards at least some of that recommendation, but we can't do all. The RFA, if you know, I don't know if you know this, but TEA is putting out an RFA to rebid the 55 providers next year in January, and at that point, it's possible that more community colleges will at least send in proposals for that. Number 2, 2012, increase the number of GED graduates. Again, this has to do with recruitment and marketing and how well we're doing with recruitment and marketing with GED graduates. And a lot of what's happening, or what I'm discovering happening, is that individual programs have recruitment plans. Individual adult basic ed programs have recruitment plans, but there's not a state plan right now for how do we recruit GED students into post-secondary education and training. So that's still a little bit stalled. We do have bridging programs for adult ed students, but those are funded only this year, and so from that information we'll learn about what's the most effective curriculum for a bridging program, and we'll share that with the state, and some of the successes of those programs as well, and the challenges as well. collaboration with TEA, the GREAT Centers, Getting Results Educating Adults in Texas, is there are 8 professional development centers in Texas funded by the federally funded money that comes through AFLA. And the idea here is to sort of encourage or build the capacity of these programs to serve both community-based organizations that don't receive federal dollars from Adult Basic Ed, and as well as to continue to build the capacity for the federally funded programs. I did receive information from TEA that the Office of Vocational Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education has approved capacity, or using some of the state leadership funds to build capacity for professional development of the non-AFLA funded providers, and that this has been going on for a couple of years now. So I do know that's happening. The next bullet, expand the use of Teams. Teams is the data management system used by the federally funded programs for accountability of the federal dollars. And the non-federally funded programs cannot use Teams because it's a secure environment. They don't have any relationship with TEA or with these federal funded programs, so that's not going to happen. However, three of the large literacy coalitions in Texas approached TEA and THECB and said, hey, we have the Houston Read Commission has a database that's brand new, that they're just rolling out, and they were requesting funds or support, a little bit of support, to perhaps use this very simple database and train the coalition in the Austin area and Fort Worth area to use it with their providers. So it's a parallel system perhaps with the TEA system, but there are some similarities to the two, but a little bit simpler to use. So that's probably that funding will have to come from, again, the federally funded leadership dollars probably to roll that out. Let's see. By 2013, build the capacity of non-AFLA providers. I can't speak to that right now. Part of this will be the more that we can build the capacity in terms of professional development with the GREAT Centers, with the non-AFLA providers, the more we can identify them. And the Texas Workforce Investment Council is working on a survey to start thinking about how to identify these providers and also the number of people out there. So once we know who's out there, where they are, how many people they serve, then we can start building their capacity to perhaps partner with their area institutions. And align developmental ed and adult basic ed. Again, a lot of this information is ongoing. I think what we're going to find with the 5 demonstration projects will help us determine how this aligned, but all of these together, I think all of these, it seems like it's different initiatives are coming together to try and determine that. Any questions? That was fast.
Any questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
We're going to wrap this up because we're running just a little bit late, and I think some people are wanting to get something to eat. Well, at least I am anyway. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making that presentation.
Chairman, I have a question on this.
Sure, go ahead.
It seems the timing when both these reports are due would allow us to review this and pass it at our next board meeting. Did I miss something? I see a due date of 31 January, and I believe as a board we're meeting in January. So why would we need to give authority to the chair to sign off on this? Can we not just bring it back to the board meeting?
When is the report due?
January 31st.
Then it can come back to the board.
Okay, I move that we bring this back to the board meeting in January for approval, both items.
Who's made this recommendation that the chair, is that a commissioner's recommendation?
This next one is under a vote. The last one we'll vote on today. This one right here. Only.
The one we just,
The recommendation is to authorize.
Well,
Yeah,
it dies
it's
if
only
you
one
don't.
item.
yes,
Yeah.
Dies if you don't move. Option for this, then.
I think that the reasoning behind the recommendation probably was because it wouldn't be able to come back before this committee, but it will be able to come back before the board. So we can choose to have the full board.
Doesn't make any difference.
That would be my preference.
I'm fine with that.
However you want it. From a parliamentary standpoint.
I was just thinking, I was just going to comment, in case anything happens and, I get hit by a bus, or if anything at all happens, I suppose that may be why it was put on the agenda now. It's about 80% done. There's just information I'm still looking for from other agencies.
There's data that
And
they're
there's
trying to
also
get
some
together.
information that I need to complete in terms of the action plan that I need approval from both of the agencies to move forward with that. And there's some appendices that have to be updated still. So the bulk of the writing is done. It's just these little pieces of information I need.
That's why we didn't have a
So-
full report to show you today,
Correct.
because of trying to get these other pieces together.
But I'm hoping by the end of December, early January, it's ready to, it's already gone through the agency, it's been edited and all, and it's ready to go.
Commissioner, unless you disagree, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any reason why you couldn't accept a motion to table this until the January board meeting.
I'm fine with that.
I don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
Motion's been, well, hold on just a second. Make sure that we're within parliamentary procedure. Can we,
Bill, they need to take a vote to table, don't they?
do we make a vote
Yes.
to table, Bill? Okay, the Chair entertains a motion to table. Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no.
And bring it on the agenda at our January meeting.
Okay, let's see.
It's just one more item.
I think we have item D, which deals with work-study mentorship program. Consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to the approval of amendments to reallocate funding within the work-study mentorship program. The bottom line is there was money appropriated to certain institutions, and they've not used all their money. The money still is within the agency, and we're simply asking that we be able to be allowed to reallocate those funds to institutions who want and need the money and are able to use the money. So, Judy, did I sum that up pretty well?
Yes, you did, Mr. Chairman. We quarterly will come back to you because there was $6.7 million appropriated this year, and where we see that institutions are not needing it for students that are in the work-study program and others are asking for it, we need permission to amend their contracts because of the amount that will affect their contracts. So we're trying to stay on top of this money and make sure it is all spent by the end of the fiscal year.
And that'll be between now and September 1?
That's right, August
Okay.
31st.
Would you be making some reports to our committee from time to time to make sure? Would you need further action on the part of this committee to re-amend the appropriation of that money, or are you going to?
It just depends as we move forward. No, I have to do it every time because of the size of the pool of money.
All right, then.
But you will get a report as part of our evaluation. We do evaluate the work-study program, so there is a report that is given yearly on this as part of our evaluations.
Committee's heard the recommendation of the commissioner. At this time, Chair entertains a motion for approval. Motion's been made. Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Motion's been made that we will not adjourn. We'll take a break for lunch. We cannot adjourn until we reassemble an open meeting, and then we'll adjourn. So at this time, the chair will say that we will adjourn and then reassemble here in 30 minutes after we have lunch. Is that okay?
You just said that we will adjourn. Is that what
No, not adjourn. I meant recess. Make sure I say it right. Recess. We're not adjourning the meeting, and then we'll come back in 30 minutes after lunch, and then we'll adjourn.